Hello again, friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru. Right here, wherever it is that you find it, each and every week, when you so anxiously wait for it to download to your phone or your computer, tablets, whatever it may be. I am your host, the great Brian Last, and joining me for this journey, and boy, it's a journey each and every week as we go through your questions, Mr. Jim Cornette.
I was waiting for you to meet. It started off good there. It started off good, and then you kind of meandered in the middle and just lost me.
Well, that was the goal, to lose you. No. But we have another great show here this week, Jim. I got to say something at the top of the show. I hope so.
Good. I'm glad.
I hope so.
That would be a departure from what we've doing. What we've been doing here over the past. Anyway, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, here at the top of the show, big announcement. There are different ways you could send in your questions, including on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru or via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. I want to say this right here at the beginning because people keep tweeting me and saying, hey, I love the show. I listen to it every week. How do I submit a question? Do you listen to the show? I say it before every single question, but I just wanted to say it here at the top of the show for everyone wondering how to submit a question, which more than likely will promptly be ignored. And no, we get a lot of questions. We don't ignore everyone intentionally, just a few of you. But that answers that, Jim. Well,
that's been a burning question that we've been going through for several weeks now. Is how do people ask questions, even though we tell them every time? So now this will settle that all once and for all.
You know, usually when the listeners say they have a burning question, I say, "Whoa, I wonder what caused that. I bet I know someone they could talk to."
Well, now you're jumping in front of my goddamn fucking. Speaking of the burning question, well, we have two things going on here this week before we start the program. And one I'll get out of the way briefly is that I'm burnt. I'm mentally burnt and spent. But the Cornette's collectibles have been culled from these shelves and have been boxed up and packed and sent out. In most part, some people order on Sunday and you can't ship on Sunday, but we're trying. They're opening up extra hours for me, as I've mentioned, here at my undisclosed post office branch. But anyway, most everything is out. What isn't out is going to be going out within a day or so. What does this program air the first time on Monday, December 17th?
Correct.
That is good. Then, folks, as I said, I don't want to be coming down your chimney on Christmas Eve. If you reasonably want to get your merchandise for Christmas to please the wrestling fan in the family or your loved one or significant other or just yourself, because there's something to be said about pleasing yourself on Christmas. I do it every year. You got to get these orders in the next couple of days because I'm not a miracle worker and it is the United States Postal Service we're talking about. Susie's only one woman. So within the next couple of days, get these things in. I'm shipping out priority mail. Of course, the international customers, you realize there's a delay because of customs and things. So, it probably ain't going to be there already anyway. And you know this, you're experienced. But for our domestic people, I'm not Amazon. I don't have like with the new fulfillment center they opened up in South Park, Colorado. Randy Marsh and all the rest of the folks are not working in my fulfillment center. It's just me, myself, and I. So did you see that episode, by the way, Unfulfilled? Fucking tremendous. They even did South Park. They open up an Amazon fulfillment center in South Park, and it runs everybody else out of business, and all the people in South Park end up having to work there. And then they do a montage where Randy Marsh goes to work with the other people in his carpool to work in the mines of Amazon, and they do the montage to 16 Tons by Tennessee Ernie Ford. I was born one morning and the sun didn't shine. Picked up my shovel and I walked to the mine. I loaded 16 tons of number 9 coal, and the straw boss said, well, bless my soul, you load 16 tons. What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. Dee, 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 dee. I was born one morning, it was drizzling rain. Fighting and trouble are my middle name. I was raised in a canebrake by an old mama line. Can no high-toned woman make me walk the line? You know, Tennessee Ernie Ford was a very underrated vocalist. But anyway.
And so are you, apparently.
So the premise of the show was that they go and work there, and then suddenly they get disgruntled. And one of the workers who's been accidentally fallen into the machinery and been put in a cardboard box only a foot square, and he can't be unpacked or his innards will fall out and he'll die, leads the workers to strike, whereupon nobody is fulfilled and all the people are upset because they're all Amazon Prime members and they can't get their packages. And then another wonderful video montage to I think it's an original piece they wrote called Unfulfilled. What some of the words were, I believe, the happiness that I felt has been raped and killed because I'm unfulfilled. It's very dramatic. But anyway, that's a new episode of South Park. But anyway, I'm not Amazon, folks. So get your orders into JimCornette.com. I've told you the figures are. These are the last figures we're going to have available for 4 to 6 months while they're remaking them. And who knows, by then there may be a tariff put on them by President Cuntflap. And I've told you that Double the Rumble, the DVD, is possibly not going to make it through the holidays. There's less than, I think, 75 left. I've mentioned that we won't even go into we'll wait to go into the Midnight Express book story until the experience this Tuesday. But anyway, or this Thursday, I should say. But anyway, get your orders in, JimCornette.com, Cornette's Collectibles. Please yourself on Christmas. Please your significant other on Christmas. Please me. Oh, yeah, like I please you. And order those fucking, you see, I'm losing my fucking mind here. And I'll tell you who could help me get my mind back. Possibly in a court of law. See, now you're on the right. Now we're back where we were going.
He's a lawyer. He's not a brain surgeon.
Took a different road to get there. Well, he can get my mind back at a court of law because he can do anything in a court of law. Of course, it's the incomparable Stephen P. New and the New Law Office, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. We've been telling people, and it was on Twitter that people were saying, well, Cornette told you so. The news came out just this past week. Not only did Johnson & Johnson have asbestos in their talcum powder, but they knew about it as far back as the 1970s and did not want that knowledge to become public. And we knew it and have been warning people about it and talking about the potential cancers of your taint and ovaries and glands and things that results from that powder seeping into all your orifices and crevices. We knew it because Stephen P. New has been cracking down on it. And people who've been harmed by these big companies like Johnson & Johnson, whose stock dropped 10%. Of course, all the stocks are dropping because people are finally figuring out Trump's a fucking moron. But Stephen P. New has been getting people rectified for this. So if your rectum was wrecked by Johnson & Johnson's baby powder or anything else, Stephen P. New can help you out. And he was the one that was blazing the trail, leading the call, the champion of the little guy out there. And they now some people have said, well, why would Johnson & Johnson have put asbestos in their talcum powder? No. When you mine the talc, we found this out because Johnson & Johnson knew this. When you mine the talc, you mine asbestos also, and you can't get all of it out. They're trying to now. But before, it was a different story. Anyway, I think it's
safe now.
I don't know. I'm off of everything now. I'm boiling everything before I ingest it or fucking put it on my skin or where I boil my clothes when I get them brand new. Who knows who's been pawing all over them and fucking in the store before you got there. But anyway, the point is that Stephen P. New has been seen as a prognosticator in Herculean proportions for calling this to our attention and for getting people what's coming to them as a result of being poisoned. And that's one other thing. All the Republicans want to deregulate everything so all the big companies can poison you or poison the atmosphere or take advantage of you in some way. But Stephen P. New, BP, Exxon, the big pharma companies, Amazon, Universal, Marriott, General Motors, he don't give a fuck. He ain't backing down from nobody because Stephen P. New is a man that covers the ground that he walks on. So give him a call or give him an email or genuflect in his direction because he's one of us and he fights for the rights of every man, woman, and child in America. If you need to sue, call Stephen P. New. New is for you. Get even with Stephen. I can't stress this enough.
All right. Well, We're done with the lawsuit portion of the program for today, and now we will move on to the listener questions.
Might say a few things that prompt a few lawsuits before the show is over with. I don't know. All right, go ahead.
You never know. You truly never know here on this show. But our first question, Jim, was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Ethan Smith. In YouTube clips, it seems rare that Bobby and Dennis color coordinated their ring gear, whereas Stan and Bobby did regularly. Was this because of advancements in TV presentation as time went on, or something else?
It was advancements in the Midnight Express's disposable income and or wardrobe functioning. When the whole year pretty much that we were in Mid-South, Bobby and Dennis wore the same things that they'd been wearing with other people. They were individuals. And then we tried to get some stuff made. When we went to Dallas, we met this shade tree seamstress who said, "Oh, I can make all this stuff." And we tried to get some stuff made that all matched and looked good. And we'd drawn up and everything for our debut for Crockett on TBS. And that was the infamous Maria Gomez, when all of a sudden she went ghost, as the kids say. And then we're calling, "Maria, we're about to leave. Maria, we're going to Atlanta next week. We need this shit. What the fuck?" And we'd give her a lot of money, right, to do this shit. And then finally Dennis took it upon himself, and his exact words were, because she would actually, I think it was either her or possibly a family member, pick up the phone when you called, and like either no speak English or Maria no hear or whatever. Somebody picked up the phone and Dennis said, "Maria Gomez, you fucking cunt. We need our shit." And she mailed in a box to me. She mailed this shit, and it was some fucking grade school level shit that we tried to wear the first couple times that we were on TBS. And like Dennis had it looked pretty good in the still pictures, but it wasn't real functional. And some of the spandex sleeves and everything, like the Fargos, that worked for a while, but we had some other stuff. It was Velcro. So that year, 86, we had some stuff and we got a few other things. But then around about the time that Dennis left and Stan came in, we were making some more money. Everybody was sprucing up a little bit. I mean, we'd never been like Flair. Flair would spend $7,000 on the best of those robes. The cheap ones were $3,000 from Miss Olivia Walker, Wrestling 2's wife. But we all had the memory that we had come from Memphis making $400 a week, and $4,000 a week probably wasn't going to last forever. And I bought cars that didn't cost $7,000. So anyway, but we finally got some shit and found other reputable people to make it that didn't charge an arm and a leg, and that's why the last couple of years all the shit looked better.
No, but with the color, though, I mean, you guys could have at least, I say you guys, I'm blaming you, but Dennis and Bobby could have at least worn the same color. They did sometimes, but then often Dennis would wear his green and Bobby would wear something else.
Well, because once again, they didn't have unlimited amount of trunks and were working fucking 9 shows a week. And sometimes the laundry didn't get coordinated. What do we got that don't stink? Here we go. That type of thing.
All right. Well, I think that answered that question. Our next question, Jim, also.
And that's, once again, I know that and I liked the fancy stuff that we got the last couple of years, but at the same time, the regional tag teams, because Dennis had some nice robes, Bobby had a couple of things, none of them all matched. But it was sort of, in those days in the territories, it was not yet what people have come to expect and what you were seeing in the WWF. I mean, because Bobby had all those goddamn custom made jumpsuits and sparkly jackets and all that shit. And I would get something made for the big shows because I was that way. But I didn't want to wear that shit that cost a lot of fucking money in goddamn, Lincolnton, North Carolina, getting bumped around by the fucking New Breed or whatever. So I just wore them on the big shows, but it wasn't expected at that point. A lot of guys actually remember most guys still didn't get music, right? Just of the main events. So,
All right. Well, our next question, Jim, also from Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Matt JH. It makes a difference if you're a southpaw in baseball or boxing. How about wrestling?
Oh.
Is it more difficult working with someone left-handed? Does a left-handed person have a harder time learning? Do arm drags suddenly become confusing injury risks?
Yeah, all of the above, depending on who it is. Now, of course, Terry Funk was left-handed, so he overcame the obstacle. A lot of times at wrestling school, even if you're left-handed, they will obviously teach you to do a lot of things right-handed, because elsewise people would have no idea what the fuck. And Terry, even though he was left-handed, still grabbed headlocks and everything on the proper side, but and he threw a hell of a punch, but it was hard. And he and Lawler meshed, better than a lot of guys, even with Terry throwing left-handed punches, because the 1-2 can sometimes become either a 1-3 or a 1-1.5, right? Because it's not the flow of the momentum. So you have to, but if you really are, confirmedly left-handed, you have to find ways to work around those things. For the majority of the people that are right-handed, it can be done, obviously, but sometimes it's tough, and you don't do everything left-handed, even if you're left-handed, or it would freak everybody. I don't know who got him started on this or how it happened, but if you go back and watch a Hulk Hogan match back when he actually did vertical suplexes, he picked you up on the wrong side. He didn't hook your head with his left arm and pick you up with his right hand, vice versa. And that would have scared the shit out of me, and I don't know how I would have come down. It's odd. It's odd, and I don't know why he did that, or I know why people let him, because it was fucking Hulk Hogan, but it had to be disorienting.
What about a guy going from wrestling in America to wrestling in Mexico? They use the other arm too, don't they?
Oh yeah, well that used to be the fucking rib. If you got a green guy in a match with you, a job guy or whatever, and he grabbed a right-handed fucking headlock, me and Bobby and Dennis would go, hola, at each other. Like, what the fuck he thinks he in Mexico? Yes, that was the whole thing. South of the border, they work the other side. Sometimes people would call it the wrong side, or sometimes the other side, or whatever the fuck. But it was opposite. And I guess it's not. I mean, they even used to shoot guys off the other way, but I don't think that's as much a thing now as it used to be, right? Down there.
I assume. Has
it been more standardized? But yeah, it even in the 70s, you'd still find a lot of guys that worked the other side there.
Our next question, Jim, on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Scott Burton, Emo ECW Mark Trash.
Okay.
What would you do in the territories if a homesteaded babyface was stale and needed a heel turn, but wasn't good at calling a match? Or what if you'd bring a new guy into the territory as a heel only to find out he couldn't call a match?
Well, that would be easier. You'd just fucking get rid of him. No, it was a standard rule of thumb, but not hard and fast, that the heel calls the match. Usually it was just done that way because, especially since the heel's probably, getting more of his ass kicked, at least he can call his own ass kicking, or he might be the more experienced guy. But obviously if you had a underneath heel and a veteran superstar babyface that had just come in that was getting some wins on the card, well, then that star would call the match. And it's all over the place. And it depends on who the people are. But so if you brought some guy in and he couldn't fucking call a match with somebody, you probably decided you made a mistake bringing him in. If you were going to turn somebody, I can think, for example, Coco Ware, this is perfect. Because a lot of people also talk about or ask about who people today don't think were great in the ring, but at one time they were. You just didn't see it. It was Coco. Because a lot of people think of the bird gimmick, and he, and I like Coco, but he went to New York and he got fat and lazy and did the bird dance thing a lot. And, and it wasn't the Coco Ware that we saw in Memphis when he first got over. But the same thing, he had been broken in as a babyface, and he started out, I think his first day on TV was doing a job for Joe LeDuc, I think. So, but even then you could tell he was in shape. And even though he was short, he had the legs, those goddamn thighs, and his leaping ability, and he moved better. Some job guys would get in the ring and move like a sack of wet hammers. But Koko, he took a bump. It looked good. You knew he had some potential. But because he stayed in the Memphis territory, he was always a babyface. And even when they try to push him as a babyface, it wasn't different enough. People, oh, that's Koko. He had been pigeonholed in people's heads as an underneath guy because they had seen him since he was an underneath fucking guy from the very beginning. But then they switched him heel, put him with Jimmy Hart's first family, shaved his head, changed his name to Sweet Brown Sugar, which, of course, Skip Young had been doing in Florida. And that's the time when Lawler was going down to Florida a little bit and got the idea, right? And all of a sudden, he's so different. He's got no hair, and he's with the first family. And Koko was never a great promo when he was young, and as a babyface, what do you have to talk about? But now as a heel, he can say a few things, let Jimmy take some of it. He can talk about how Lawler kept him down, blah, blah, blah. But in the ring, he was incredible. And that's how he was able to get over in Memphis finally, was as a heel and doing all that shit. Whether it was, he was first worked a program with Lawler, so naturally he's doing Lawler's fist drop off the top, but he would jump 3 or 4 feet up off the top turnbuckle and go halfway across the ring. Or the fucking drop kicks off the top rope, or the big bumps he took. When Lawler knocked him over the top rope backwards, he fucking flew. And he'd be thrown through the ropes and hardly touch shit. He was insane, because he was getting his first big push, and all that shit got him over. And then when he teamed with Bobby, Sugar and Eaton were an incredible team that nobody but Memphis was seeing. But that's where, if you remember the Vegematic, right?
Yeah.
Well, Bobby and Koko had done a version of a thing where Koko got the guy in the bear hug and leaned him out, and Bobby came off with the knee drop to the chest. But it didn't look as good because they didn't really practice the lean out. So he was just kind of at a bear hug leaning the guy over. So Bobby didn't have a lot of area. And the knee, Bobby had to hold up because he was so far off the ground, and it didn't come together. But I remembered when Bobby and Stan were teaming that they had done that, and Stan had that freaky spring in his legs, but he was very nimble. That's why I always had him doing things like jumping over the top rope. He was so graceful. So they'd do the blind tag, and Bobby would come off the ropes and baseball slide under the rope, and Stan would leap nimbly over the top. And when the babyface turned around, he'd fucking clothesline him. Or Stan could just had a great vertical leap. Well, in this case, he had a deep squat. So if Stan got the bear hug on the guy and leaned him out and had that deep squat where he was almost like a foot off the ground, right? Level out. And Bobby comes off with the leg, it's boom, boom. And it looked devastating. So that's where that came from. But anyway, Koko was fucking tremendous in the ring during that run in Memphis. And then when he got with Norvell Austin as the PYTs, they were doing a lot of the gimmick. And they actually got a spot, in Louisiana, and I think they were in Dallas and a few other places. Florida. So he was starting to travel around a little bit, but then as soon as he went to the WWF, he gained weight and lost his fucking oomph, I think. And then he was always, after that, was kind of presented as, once again, a guy on the card. So, but athletically, when he was young and motivated, holy shit. And anyway, that kind of turned, even if Koko couldn't call a heel match, he was working with Lawler. So Lawler was going to call the match anyway, but he learned how to be a heel that way. And Koko's the one with Lawler has that hand-eye coordination where he doesn't slap when he punches, he slaps when he gets punched. He had such incredible coordination, he'd do a spot where the guy would back him up in the corner and put his left hand on Lawler's chin and draw back with his right hand and throw this big haymaker right to the face, right? And when he did that, Lawler simultaneously would slap the guy on his side, but you would see the fist in the face, and Lawler would sell it that way, and you'd hear the smack, and holy shit, right? It took me several times to figure it out, watching close at ringside. But the first time he starts working with Coco's just switched heels, so he's never punched Lawler before. Coco pushes Lawler back in the corner, draws back, hits him with that big right hand, and Lawler slaps Coco's side. And Coco bent over and sold it and started selling like, oh, he stopped me. Oh, my God. And it blew the whole thing, at least in that building.
I was like, remember when Coco and Bobby with Jimmy had a confrontation with the sheep herders, the two heel teams in the studio?
Yes. And that was, people liked seeing the first family, even that they hated to love them, because if they were against other heels, they were so exciting. But then because they were with Jimmy when they're against the baby faces, they could still keep their heat. And then Bobby, when Coco then, who was it now? Goddamn, how did they switch this? It was Coco switched back babyface to team with Lawler, and they had matches with Bobby Eaton and Sabu, the original Sabu, Coco Samoa. And they fought all over the fucking Coliseum, all over the building, wherever they were at, and used the tables in the ring and all that bullshit. It was just crazy. A completely different kind of match than Lawler had with Coco, where they were all high spot matches. And they kept things fresh that way. But after that, if you to the original question, when they turned Coco and then he was in those matches and with that group of people, then he learned how to do them. And then he could go and call them after that. So if you've got a green guy that can't call a match, but you can freshen him up, you put him in with a veteran that'll teach him.
Our next question, Jim, on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru, is from Tony Barker. Watching Mid-South Wrestling from early 1984, and Carl Fergie came into the area as the King, but was soon transitioned into a referee. Did Bill Watts force Fergie into that role, or was refereeing something he wanted to partake in?
Well, he didn't necessarily go down there with the thought of being a referee, but Watts didn't force him because he went down there with the thought of partaking in a paycheck. Carl was one of the guys, they had so many guys in Memphis when Watts had come up and they did the trade with Jarrett, and Watts took me and the Midnight, Rock and Roll, Terry Taylor. Dundee was going to be the booker. There were still a bunch of guys that really didn't have, because Carl had been with us that summer in the thing we did in Georgia for Ole, right? At King Carl Fergie, because he's Lawler's cousin. Lawler gave him a crown and a fucking old cape or whatever, and to give him a gimmick to go work in the Georgia territory. Well, then there just wasn't room in Memphis when we all came back, and Dundee liked Carl. So he said, hey, I think they booked him first just to go down and take a look at him as King Carl Fergie on the TV. But since Lawler had made at least one appearance and might make a few more as part of this deal, they said, well, let's not do the King thing. And then, at that point, I think it was Ricky Ferrara they'd had as a referee. And I don't know why he wasn't there anymore. He ran a gym in Alexandria. But I don't know whether it was heat or he just quit or just didn't want, whatever the fuck, but they were short a referee and ended up bringing Carl in to referee. And he was as big as the boys. So it was good in that he could believably, physically keep order, but it was kind of not good in that you always want your referees to be littler so the guys look bigger. But so he was a big for a referee, but like Nick Patrick, because Nick started out as a wrestler. And Fergie took to it, and he did a great job. It took him a while to get used to having heat put on him as a referee, because every time I'd jump up and distract him for the Midnight to do something, he'd like, Jimmy, don't keep me too long, my blowjobs, right? He's afraid the girls would get fucking mad at him. But no, and Carl did a good job. And I would say the way business was at that point in Mid-South, he probably was making $1,000 a week, and this was 1984 or maybe 800 or whatever, a lot of weeks. As the referee, he wouldn't have made that much if he was wrestling in Memphis. So he didn't have to take bumps.
How good was he in the ring?
As a wrestler, he was good. He knew what he was doing, and he knew how to work. He didn't have a spectacular body. He didn't do anything spectacular. He just did everything good. And he was one of those guys that would have always had a job in the territories had the territories stayed around if he wanted it. But as everything was starting to constrict, if you didn't have some outstanding characteristic, you weren't going to get a spot.
Our next question was sent in via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. It is from Mike Mills from the Booking the Territory podcast, who also has a Smoky Mountain Wrestling review podcast that he does. Hello,
and
Jim.
And who gets retweeted by me on a regular basis.
On the March 13th, 1993 episode of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Robert Fuller cut a promo where he says he's got women problems and the IRS on his rear end. And he finishes complaining about his problems. He puts his finger to his head as if he's going to blow his brains out, and then says, "I'm not going to do the Von Erich thing." Doc and I from BTT have a couple questions. One, assuming you did not know Robert Fuller was about to say that,
that would be a good assumption.
What was your initial reaction when you heard it? And two, do you remember there being any blowback from anyone in the wrestling business at the time from Fuller insinuating he wasn't going to commit suicide like a Von Erich?
Well, no, because the only people in the wrestling business that saw it were the people working for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and they knew Robert. See, that was the thing. The one good thing about Robert Fuller is you didn't need to give him a promo. He could cut a promo at any time, any way, any shape, any form, anywhere on anybody. And as I recall from that promo, I said, okay, you guys go to the desk or whatever. And whether they were talking about the rock and roll or talking about the 3-team thing we were doing with the bodies or whatever, he had 2 minutes. And I said, talk about the fucking what we're doing. I can't even remember what it was. That might have been coming up on the Knoxville shows or the first Bluegrass Brawl or whatever. The rest of it was from the mind of Robert Fuller. I didn't wish the Von Erichs any ill will. I don't know if there was any heat because Robert was part of the USWA when they had that Dallas thing going or whatever. I don't know, but it was goddamn, that was promos in those days. Shit got said. What can I say? But I didn't know about it. I didn't know what anybody was going to say beforehand. I knew what they were going to talk about. I didn't exactly know what they were going to say because we didn't do that back then.
Did anyone ever cross the line and say something where you said, okay, we have to redo that or we have to retake that? I mean, I can't even think of a time New Jack did where you had to redo anything.
No. And see, that's the thing. I guess we could have redone it if they'd have gone out and just said fuckity McFuck or something really phony looking had happened. Anytime you see a crowd shot on Smoky Mountain Wrestling, something looked phony in the ring. That's pretty much a given because that's why I had them shoot the crowd shots because we were on limited budget, limited turnaround schedule, and limited post-production abilities back in those days. So I couldn't, if something was bad and we could bleep shit if they cussed accidentally. But if somebody had just gone out and just fucked the whole goddamn thing up, I guess we could have rolled back. But then we would have been smartening up the people in the building if we started something off exactly the same again. So, but we never had a – no, New Jack knew he was on television. I told him go out and make white people mad, right? And but obviously don't say anything and get us kicked off fucking television. A couple times it might have been close, not as far as profanity, but content possibly. But fortunately, most people that would be offended by the wrestling program weren't watching the wrestling program. The only thing we had to redo that I can think of in Smoky Mountain television history was Al Snow's debut match. I've told that story. You remember that, right?
Yeah.
So I guess you don't want me to tell it again.
No, tell it again. Other people
I know you say, yeah. That's a shitty story. No. Basically, and we had to figure out a way to do this because it was in front of a big live crowd, right? So Al had come down, and I've been telling everybody, hey, this guy's great. We're going to have the world's greatest wrestler, Al Snow, and he's going to do all this great stuff. And I get George South to work with him in his first match on Smoky Mountain TV, just so they can have a wonderful high spot match. And Al has been working for quite a while, but has almost never done television since like the ICW days in the 80s, early 80s. So the people it's a good crowd. I can't remember where we were. I think it was over in Hickory or Morganton, North Carolina. And the place is full and people are easy. And they go to lock up when the bell rings, and Al goes one side and yells at the people. And then goes to lock up, but goes the other side. And okay, he's working the people a little bit, but the clock is ticking. They got 6 minutes. And Al doesn't realize he didn't have his internal clock yet for television. And he thinks because they're getting this great reaction that he should just continue to browbeat the people. Well, by the time that he finished browbeating these people and started actually working, 4.5 minutes of the 6 minutes had fucking gone by, and they get a cue to go home. So he did almost nothing. And then basically fucking beats George South, the goddamn whatever his finish was. So, and that looked good. So he comes back, and I'm in the locker room throwing chairs in the corner. Bam, bam, bam. He's going to ask, how was it? He can see how it was. Here comes George. I said, here's what we're going to do. George, you go back out there and you say there's no way that man can beat me again. He caught me unawares, and challenge him to get back in the ring. Al, you go back and get in the fucking ring, and goddamn, y'all do some high spots. Do some wrestling, right? Some action. And then we'll put that in and then use your previous entrance and the previous finish. And they go back out there and they do that. And as soon as they lock up, they go into the goddamn spot where they're hitting the ropes and dropping down and hip tossing and drop kicking and doing all this stuff for about 35 or 40 seconds nonstop. And I'm like, yeah, this is going to be good. And then boom, and then a small package and 1, 2, 3. I'm like, what the fuck? They did one spot. So if you go back and you watch Al Snow's debut on Smoky Mountain Wrestling Television, it's parts of 2 matches, and it ain't that long.
Did Bob Caudle ever say anything to you about the Gangsta's interviews? Because he looks so uncomfortable standing next to New Jack.
Well, wouldn't you be?
Well,
fuck. Bob was probably got his hand on his wallet every fucking second, and possibly with good reason. No, he never. I mean, Bob was A, Bob was fun. B, Bob was smart to the business. C, Bob was no longer working for Jesse Helms. To where some political opponent in North Carolina could say, well, look what your employee is doing here on television with this Negro American fellow. So no, he didn't say anything. The only thing he ever said was, boy, those trips were starting to get harder when he had to go across that mountain up into fucking Western Virginia or somewhere from Raleigh.
That dividing line was where Steve Skyfire turned into Steve Skydiver, I believe. But anyway, our next question here, Jim, sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com is from Brad Murr. Jim, what are your thoughts on today's Impact? How do you feel on talent like, you're going to have to excuse me, I don't know a lot of these people, Ali, Lax, Su Yung, and the return of the X Division?
Well, Lax is LAX, Latin American Exchange.
Oh, excuse me, I thought that was another person.
It used to quit. Now, it used to be Homicide and Hernandez, and now it's two younger folks that have taken on the mantle. I actually probably would have given them a compliment if this had been taped even a day previously to this, but Impact Wrestling could go fuck themselves with a rusty fucking fishing knife.
Whoa. Something happened I don't know about?
Apparently they're doing these, and and Don Callis, I love you, I'm sorry, but if unless you fire everybody that had anything to do with this, or Ed Nordholm, if you want to fucking step in and see whose head you can lop off over this. But apparently they're doing these Twitch specials now. And apparently they're doing them in conjunction with local independent promotions, which is a great idea. And actually another one that I had with Ring of Honor a while back to work with the legitimate local promotions in each area that we ran live events in. But nevertheless, I digress. They're doing these, and they were in somewhere in Ohio, I now understand, for Ohio versus everything. Or Ohio hates everything, or Ohio fucks everything up, or whatever the fuck, which is one of the tag teams, and it's a theme that they were using, or what, I don't know. But I saw this on Twitter. It was on, at first I thought somebody was ribbing that they'd superimposed an Impact Wrestling logo to make Impact look bad or knock them or whatever. And I thought, well, that's kind of bullshit that you'd fake something, right? That you'd put a recognized company's logo on a piece of shit fucking outlaw match in a barn, right? Come to find out it was on the special that Impact put their name and branding on, where this completely grotesque, unprofessional, fat fuck, comedy wrestler in quotation marks, and some other fucking fat outlaw guy wearing his uncle's pajamas. I don't know. And they're in this dark fucking barn. And I assume there were people there past the front row of two sides. You didn't see them much, but whatever the fuck. They didn't have enough of a budget to pipe in some noise. There were some people yelling from the corners. The fat fuck and the other just regular fuck go to do a spot where the regular fuck's dropping down and the fat fuck's jumping over him, right? But the guy drops down and the fat fuck stops and lumbers, because he really can't. He's such a fucking corpulent, obese piece of shit, such a human fucking waterbed, that he can't really get his leg up, but he steps over kind of slowly and again. And then they're just doing slow motion bullshit comedy rest. And then another time the guy goes out on the floor and the fat guy goes like he's going to fucking dive. But of course he can't dive because he looks like one of the McGuire twins. He couldn't get through the ropes. So instead he gets out on the apron and then lumbers down, and they do more fake wrestling. And since Impact Wrestling decided to put their fucking name on that, then they own it and they're responsible for it. So from me, fuck you. Fuck, unless Don Callis or Ed Nordholm or whoever the fuck else is in charge of that goddamn shit show. I tweeted out, this is why their company that once was the only pretender and only competitor to Vince McMahon, thanks to bad creative and bad leadership. And for years in the Spike era, we know who those places were. Thanks to bad creative and bad leadership and letting the fucking guys do a lot of shit they shouldn't have done in the fucking ring. Now they are reduced to on Twitch, broadcasting fucking programs from a barn in Ohio with an unprofessional fat fuck doing spots that make Haystacks Calhoun look like Tiger Mask. And they wonder why I tweeted that your company has the stench of grisly death on it. So fuck that whole goddamn thing. Because they might as well just fold the goddamn tent, and the Canadians might as well just admit they got fucking snookered and just goddamn set fire to whatever they're doing. Because if that's the best they can fucking do, or if they validate that fucking shit in any way with their logo on a broadcast that they're responsible for, they can suck my big fat white fucking dick. Fuck you.
Our next.
So if you'd asked that yesterday, I'd have said, well, they're trying, and, and they've got some good guys there, and some friends of mine or, employees there or whatever. But now, no, after I saw that, fuck you. Just get out of the fucking way at this point. Just let guys go somewhere where they can be fucking stars instead of goddamn subjecting the few remaining legitimate talents that you have left to this fucking horse shit and being associated with that to where they get the stench of goddamn play wrestlers and grisly death on them too. I don't know why the fucking guys would even goddamn contemplate going to. Why would you want to be involved with Impact Wrestling if that's the kind of shit they're putting out or validating as a talent? Why would you want to be there? Why would you want to be especially not contractually obligated when somebody legitimate might want to give you a fucking job, but just why would you want to validate something like that with your fucking presence if you're a real talent? Fuck. If they can't do any better than that, fucking quit.
Our next question was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Chad Lowry. Dear Mr. Cornette, please answer this on air. I've asked this question before. Why doesn't the likes of Nature Boy Paul Lee get you cussing mad and your blood pressure at near-death levels? I mean, you let Omega, Ryan, and David Arquette get you in that shape, and at least they came up with their own gimmick. Paul Lee just didn't rip off the nickname. He ripped off every mannerism from Ric Flair. I know he paid him and all. I know he paid him and all, but geez, get real. I also did see you praise him on a YouTube video too. I guess he paid you for your endorsement as well. If that's why you won't answer this question on air, I guess it's supposed to be is. Is that why you won't answer this question on air? If you love the business as much as you say you do, then just tell me how this doesn't get you as upset as the others I mentioned.
Well, I wouldn't answer it on the air till now because it's a stupid fucking question. But what I don't know the thought process behind equating somebody wrestling blow-up dolls and 9-year-old girls and fucking doing phony, blatant bullshit in a ring to make mockery of the wrestling business, and a guy whose whole gimmick is that he claims that he's the real Nature Boy instead of the one that everybody knows is the real guy, and he still goes out and has fucking matches where he attempts to try to look like shit he's doing is real. What the fuck? How? I don't even understand. I got a kick out of Paul Lee. He did some work for me in Smoky Mountain, and I've worked a couple of shows down there in his hometown because that's what he does now, for fuck's sake. He has a regular business, and every once in a while he runs a show because in his area, everybody knows that Paul Lee considers himself the real Nature Boy, and he draws several hundred folks, and he has legitimate matches, and it's a goddamn gimmick. That's how he gets heat as a heel. But in some cases, I said now in his hometown, he's a babyface almost because people like him. I don't know what to tell you. But that does in no way equate with having phony matches with the Invisible Man. What the fuck? Can help me, Brian. What am I missing here?
Well, did you see the clip not too long ago? There was some kind of Trump rally in, I guess, North Carolina. I'm guessing that's where a Ric Flair clone would live. And Paul Lee was in the crowd.
Oh, God, that's right.
And they showed it on TV, and it said wrestling superstar Ric Flair. And all I'm thinking is this is his wildest dream, to be recognized on TV as Ric Flair.
So, and actually, and now that you remind me of that, I must cuss Paul. Fuck you, Paul. Even though I like you for being at a fucking Trump rally. But, and also for putting heat on Flair, for fuck's sake. But no, his gimmick does the real Nature Boy does not offend me, but now that you mentioned it, the fact that Paul was at a Trump rally is something that is going to fucking, I'm not going to be able to forget, and is going to cause a stain on our relationship forevermore.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Jerry Wooten in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. As an old school wannabe
Wait a minute, did you just say Rocky Mountain?
No, it just says Rocky Mount.
Okay, I thought you said Rocky Mountain, and I was going to say there is no Rocky Mountain. It's Rocky Mount.
Well, maybe because I said North Carolina right after it, it sounded as if I said Rocky Mount. I said Rocky Mount, and
that or I just almost caught you, and you're trying to fucking cover up.
You can't almost catch me if it almost didn't happen.
Well, that's your story.
Well, let's get Jerry's story here. As an old school wannabe wrestling aficionado, I wanted to hear your take regarding Bobo Brazil's unrecognized NWA title win over Nature Boy Buddy Rogers on October 18th, 1962. From what I've read, Brazil initially refused to take the title due to Rogers claiming to have been injured prior to the match. Interestingly, the NWA awarded Brazil the title the next day after, quote, finding nothing wrong with Rogers. Question: why was this title change not recognized by the NWA? And also, is this why Ron Simmons is recognized as the first African-American world champion and not Bobo Brazil?
Well, no, it's because nobody remembers Bearcat Wright either. But wasn't that the deal? And I don't know. And if it was in Hornbaker's book, I apologize that I haven't memorized every page of it, but there's so much information. But that wasn't meant to be a disputed switch and both guys with the championship like with Carpentier and Thez a few years beforehand. Wasn't that the old deal where Rogers went for the leapfrog and Bobo headbutted him in the nuts and Rogers couldn't continue, but Bobo, being a babyface, refused to accept the victory, right? But then did his home promotion wherever the fucking match was. Did it say where it was? Was it in Chicago? Where was it?
I don't know. It doesn't say here.
Anyway, didn't they put in the program that no, there wasn't any matter and Bobo's the champion, but it wasn't recognized by the NWA because that was just another one of Rogers's creative finishes to not get beat, but not beat the babyface. Something like that.
The Carpentier one is the one that's most fascinating, because he actually defends the NWA title for a long period of time as the champion, and it's his title losses that starts the WWA title in California. And did he also lose to Vern when Vern was starting the AWA, or am I thinking of something else?
Well, no. Here's the thing, and once again, I'd have to have the book in front of me to do this instead of off the top of my head, but Thez, because Carpentier was so hot as a babyface at that point, And also because Carpentier worked for Eddie Quinn in Montreal, who Thez was close to. Thez wanted to go to take a tour of England, Europe, and Japan, and to be the international champion and get big payoffs, bigger than he'd get in this country over there, especially I think in Japan with Ricky Dozan, whatever. So he wanted somebody to put the belt on here that could keep it warm and draw with it while he went and did his European and overseas tours. And Carpentier was the guy they put it on, but then Eddie Quinn, as I recall, threw a stumbling block into the fucking deal some kind of way because Quinn didn't want to lose Carpentier a full time from Montreal because he was doing such incredible business to go on the road as the NWA champion. And they had left an out for Thez to come back and do the unification match anyway. So somehow, basically, Eddie Quinn got the Carpentier run ixnayed over money. And I mean, there was large sums of money involved that was going to go to guarantees for different people. But Quinn kind of was the fly in the ointment. And but still Carpentier had the reputation of being the world champion in a number of places off of that deal. So when Thez just said, they fucking put the belt back on Thez, he got back, whatever the fuck. No, they put the belt back on Thez, and then he dropped it. Wasn't that when he dropped it to Hutton so he could go overseas?
Yeah, Hutton was what, 58?
Yeah, because that's what he was trying to do with Carpentier. But anyway, but Carpentier, yes, because he had been considered a world champion in some places in the country. Anybody who had a victory over him or could get one after that would create a world championship lineage based on Carpentier, whether it was California. And then Vern I can't remember, but Vern challenged the champion and Thez. And when he never came, Vern declared himself, but then the Carpentier was in that some kind of way.
In the Omaha, remember how there was like two different AWAs for a while? There was the Omaha end and the Minneapolis end. I think Carpentier went in as the world champion in Omaha and lost it to Vern. Or maybe if it wasn't to Vern, it was to someone in Omaha.
It may have been Mad Dog and then Mad Dog to Vern.
Yeah, something like that. But
something like that.
What about Kowalski? Didn't he also have a little bit of a run with the NWA title during Buddy's run where he was defending the title as well?
I think he did, as a matter of fact. And I think that may have been more wasn't it for the Northeast United States at the time? But Rogers was, for a guy who didn't want to ever do any jobs and everything, he was responsible for a lot of shady title switches, but it was always in such a way that, he never actually got beat.
Yeah, it was everywhere he went. It was everywhere he went. He caused trouble. I hate to say it. But after a certain period of time, I was just talking recently on the Superpodcast about the Great Antonio. You remember the Great Antonio?
Oh, yes, the big bus puller.
The big bus puller. Do you remember they had the match with him and Inoki at the end of the 70s where Inoki got fed up with this guy just not working with him and just started kicking the crap out of him?
Yes. Yeah, they brought him over there because he had been around. Remember in the late 50s, he worked the Garden. And had been around in Canada and various places in the Northeast on and off for years, but he was this giant fucking freaky looking fuck that was like 6'3" or 4" and big fat, 400-pound fucking guy, big fat guy, but with the long hair that he would braid into this giant braid, and he'd hook that to a rope and pull a bus by the rope down the city street, and he was supposed to be the strongest man in the world, but he never wrestled anywhere for long or one place for long because he was apparently so spectacularly shitty that you couldn't really see him and ever come back and want to see him again. But somehow Inoki was sold to Billy Goods to bring this beast over there and beat him, right, to get his, tough guy reputation over. And it just – the guy – I remember seeing that. It wasn't that he wasn't selling. He couldn't really figure out how to sell or do anything either. And Inoki just said, fuck this, and just beat the fuck out of him, right?
Well, the reason he was over there was he had done a tour of Japan. Fumi Saito recently told me about this on the show. In the early 60s or mid-60s, and he did the bus pulling thing, got over big. And the reason I tie this into the Buddy Rogers talk, on that tour, he apparently really pissed off Carl Gotch and Dr. Big Bill Miller. And that was the last anyone heard from the great Antonio for the better part of a decade. And then they brought him back for the Antonio Inoki match.
And it didn't end well for the great Antonio.
No.
Not the Inoki Antonio.
Yeah, and of course I say that it ties in because those two guys got fed up with Buddy Rogers and all of his nonsense and taught him a lesson that kept him out for, how long was he injured for?
It was a couple, the way that I understand it, Gotch wanted to speak to him and Miller was watching the door, right? Was that the way it was?
Allegedly, yes.
But I mean, that's the order. It wasn't that Miller went to talk to him. Gotch wanted to talk to Buddy Rogers, and Bill Miller was going to watch the dressing room door. And when Rogers attempted to escape the talking to, somehow his hand got caught in the door and was in a cast for a couple months. And and remember, once in 61 and 62, Buddy Rogers was the biggest draw in the box office draw in the wrestling business. And still had the fucking some of the boys going after him in the locker room and had a very checkered reputation. But he was great. He was a great one.
How would you compare, I haven't thought about it this way, but how would you compare him at that period of time, 61, 62, to Shawn Michaels?
Oh, my God. Well, Shawn Michaels was playing checkers and Buddy Rogers was playing chess. Shawn Michaels was just on pills and fucked up and doing stupid adolescent bullshit and just because he could and get away with it and was, shitting in people's lunchbox or whatever. Buddy Rogers was trying to take over major territories, manipulate the booking, keep the world championship and also run the business from the locker room in a major way. What Nash, I would equate Nash and Rogers better than Shawn Michaels and Rogers, only Nash didn't have the in-ring. But Nash was a lot smarter than Michaels, and they ended up running the wrestling business, and him and Helmsley in large extent from the locker room. But Michaels was an amateur next to Buddy Rogers.
And Buddy Rogers had his clique as well. His guys that he kept with him and protected everywhere he went, and then when he disappeared, they all seemed to disappear too.
Yeah, well, that's right. Fucking the great Scott, Billy Darnell. Fucking, the Fargos were not as much in his clique as much as disciples and I don't want to say imitators, but Jackie Fargo's tagline was often imitated but never duplicated, and everything he was doing, he was imitating Buddy Rogers. The strut and the pally and the blonde hair and everything, but they escaped that and a few others. But the real heavy duty inside clique didn't last long either, did they?
Well, I never knew that part. Hold on, he stole the pally from Buddy Rogers. I know Buddy Rogers used to say it. I never figured it was as easy as he heard Buddy Rogers say it and he started saying it.
Well, it almost had to be because I saw not a video, but a film transfer of a Buddy Rogers match from 1944 when he was still a babyface and had dark hair, and he did Fargo's referee pat on the shoulder spot when the heel was covering him. Which I saw Jackie Fargo do in person at the Louisville Gardens 30 years later. Think about this. How many people do shit that Ric Flair does? And how many people now in this generation do shit that fucking Shawn Michaels did 20 years ago? Everybody in the business was doing something of Buddy Rogers's.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru from Phoenix Rising. I was wondering what Jim's best memories are of working events out of Houma, Louisiana.
Oh, Jesus.
Recently, the Athletic Commission banned events in Houma, so I was wanting to hear some good stories of his times here.
Well, now I'd like to ask some questions. Why did they ban? Just let's ban events? I mean, it's that kind of town. Now, Houma was, along with Laranja, Louisiana, was a real political town where the only reason they ran this fucking barn in the middle of a mud field was because whoever the guy was that owned it was somehow politically connected and got him into the Baton Rouge Centroplex. And I don't know whether it was Jimmy Kilshaw or whether it was some stooge of his or whatever, but I was told they went to Laranja every 2 weeks in this just shithole because of to be able to get to run Baton Rouge. Houma, they had to be political also because, goddamn, by this point especially, they didn't need that money to risk that. It was on the verge of a fucking riot every time you went out in that building. It was a rec center in Houma, Louisiana, especially 35 years ago, was this small town in southern Louisiana where sometimes the Cajun accents were so strong that you couldn't understand some of the people when they were speaking English because it was such a heavy Cajun accent. And it was one of those towns where there's basically one road in and one road out. And when you went in this rec center, you had to go in the back door right into the rec center. You went right from the back door into the building with the people and everything, and then turn right and go into the locker room, which there was no escape from except to go back out into the people. The locker room was just a brick holding cell with not even a window that you could get out of, right? So every time you'd have fucking the main event, if anything at all hot was going on, and then depending on sometimes even if it wasn't, but how drunk the people were, and there's 800 people jammed into this fucking rec center, which had to be all it would hold. You just had to go to the locker room and wait until the cops could clear the building out and clear the parking lot out, and then you waited some more because they might be waiting for you. And that's where, when Dennis Condrey and I were leaving one night, Bobby was riding with Bill Dundee and had gone out just a few minutes before and had already left. And me and Dennis are getting in my car, and here comes 12 guys, right? Hot. And the one guy says something to fucking Dennis. Dennis said something back. The guy has a full beer can he hadn't opened yet. He throws it at fucking Dennis. Dennis from 4 or 5 feet. I mean, that close. He's going to beat him with it. He throws that, Dennis ducks that, grabs the guy in Fujiwara, armbarred him to the fucking gravel drive, and fucking put a boot in his face, knocked him goofy. Now there's 11 more of them. Fuck! I'm standing there with a tennis racket, right? Suddenly, here headlights, horn honk, the Rock and Roll Express started their car on the other side of the parking lot, saw what was going on, and drove through the people who scattered and allowed us to jump in our car and fucking take off. Man, that's a Dr. Death and Hercules one night against the Rock and Roll, and I'm managing Doc and Herc. I've got Dr. Death's football helmet, right? As they come out of the ring and we're trying to get back to the locker room, I get in between them, but people start coming from ringside because it just seats on the floor there, and then there was this balcony on a couple sides. But the people start coming as we go down the aisle. First row came, then second row came, so we're backing up toward the fucking locker room. And Doc's knocking some motherfucker out, and Herc's knocking some motherfucker out. And if anybody gets through, I'm just kind of trying to beat them with the football helmet. And they put us back in the goddamn locker room, and the cops got in front of it. And by the time they could clear the building and then the parking lot and et cetera, it was like 45 minutes or an hour. We got to sit in there and wait. And you don't know whether to open the door or not. You're just going to wait until the cops come and say, hey, it's the cops. This is a fucking rib. I hated Houma, Louisiana. Let me just say that clearly.
What is the longest you ever had to wait in a building after a show?
Usually we tried to go in the other direction, and if we knew ahead of time, especially, we would try to get out so quick that people couldn't get out the front door and get around the back in time, right? But that was one. You always waited in Houma. We always Albany, Georgia, I don't know why, but they wouldn't have any specific parking in those days for the wrestlers. You just had to park in the lot whenever you fucking pulled up. And it was like pulling teeth to get the cops to come walk you afterwards, right? And one time the boys got fucking, oh, come on, let's go. I'm like, I ain't walking out there in front of those and through those 300 fucking people with no fucking cops, right? And Dennis said, I'm going, and he starts, and I'm like, Dennis, come back. I had the car keys. So they walk, and then the cops come. I said, take me out there. And we go catch them, and they're circled around the fucking car with people yelling at them. I said, wait, I told you to wait. Anyway, and Galliano, Louisiana, that night that we were in that fucking place, and the cops told us to leave town and don't stop until we were in the next parish. That was about an hour after the show. And I mean, anytime in the Carolinas, if you were in a big Coliseum match, and you couldn't get out before the show was over, you waited a while to let everything disperse and then get the cops and then make a concerted effort to get to your car and get out of there.
Our next question, Jim, is actually not a question. It's a correction from a recent episode. It was sent in by Matt Rogers to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. The New Age Dog is a local guy here in Marshall, Texas, who would run shows in a cold-ass prefab building that drew 5 people. I have a buddy who knows him. Thank you, Matt, for sending that in. Our next question.
To explain for the newer viewers, we had a question on whether the New Age dog was really a real thing or not, and we didn't think so, but apparently he was. Correct. A real Outlaw Mud Show thing.
Our next question, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi. I was listening to an interview with Eric Watts where he claimed in the early 1990s that he tossed Rick Rude around like a rag doll in the locker room while people like Sting and Vader were there to watch. I haven't heard anything else about this in any shoot interviews online.
What now? Start that again.
I was listening to an interview with Eric Watts where he claimed in the early 1990s that he tossed Rick Rude around like a rag doll in the locker room while people like Sting and Vader were there to watch. I haven't heard anything else about this in any shoot interviews online. Is there any truth to this story?
Let me preface this by saying I was not in WCW at that period of time, so I could not have been there, but I have a feeling that I probably would not have seen anything such as that while I was there if I was there. That does not compute.
All right.
Now, maybe he's talking about, because Eric did amateur wrestle at a high level, so maybe they did a friendly shoot thing where they got down on the floor at some TV taping and Eric scored a point on him or whatever, because Rude's background was more in arm wrestling and et cetera, but throwing around like a rag doll does not compute.
All right, our final question this week here on the Drive-Thru, Jim, was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Rodney Esty.
Hot Rod!
Hey!
I'll tell you. Yeah.
My wife and I were happy for 20 years. Then we met. All right. Let's get Rodney's question is, what are your top 3 to 5 Christmas movies? I Love a Christmas Story, Christmas Vacation, and Elf.
Well, my favorite, it's not a movie, but my favorite Christmas special, actually 2 specials. A Charlie Brown Christmas for the music. That's my happy dance.
You know how many music publishing laws you violated this week alone here on the show?
I flaunt the laws. I'm a scofflaw. I scoff. I'm scoffing now. Scoff. But and of course, How the Grinch Stole Christmas for the incredible narration by Boris Karloff. And also the soundtrack, you're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. You've got crabgrass in your soul. You get the picture. But as far as movies, It's a Wonderful Life. A Christmas Story is evergreen, and it's like potato chips. You can pick it up and watch it anywhere. It's just a collection of scenes that you like to watch. It's almost like a greatest hits album. And then Holiday Inn is very underrated. The 1942 original, not the 1954 White Christmas remake, but Holiday Inn 1942 with Bing Crosby, of course, and his immortal White Christmas. Die Hard.
You consider Die Hard a Christmas movie? That's a big debate online right now.
I'm just kidding. And I like Christmas Vacation, okay, but they had a vacation at one point for everything for a while there, and I prefer the original, which was the heart and soul of the piece. So, but yeah, It's a Wonderful Life, A Christmas Story, Holiday Inn. What am I missing? What are the usual suspects? Am I overlooking something?
I don't think so.
Well, boy, what are your favorite Hanukkah movies then there, fella?
Unfortunately, there are not any Hanukkah movies that I can think of.
Well, there's probably a good fucking reason for that, so mind your fucking beat.
Because all this Nazi propaganda Christmas movie shit gets out there.
Hey,
we need more Hanukkah.
Fucking Frank Capra did not sympathize with the Nazis.
No, he didn't. I have his biography here. It's a great book.
Yeah, I'll slap you naked and hide your clothes.
I'm sorry? Well, that'll be for the bonus part of the drive-thru this week, but the drive-thru is closed.
That'll be when we get to Patreon. And then the nude photos of Brian Last standing like the statue Michelangelo's David.
I'm pretty sure the last thing you need is another co-host sending nude photos around. But with that, the drive-thru has closed. All right. If you want to get
just take it away from here. I'm done. Take it away.
Of course, you can hear us on the Jim Cornette Experience when it debuts on every Thursday, or listen to it whenever you want. It's on demand wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast, the Jim Cornette Experience. Also available now on YouTube, on the official Jim Cornette channel. Just go to tinyurl.com/official Corny YouTube, or go to YouTube and search for the Jim Cornette Experience, Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru, official Jim Cornette, whatever you want to put in. It'll take you right there. Videos going up each and every week with the new episodes, escorted by exclusive Travis Heckel artwork. Check that out now. Once again, tinyurl.com/official Corny YouTube. You can follow Jim on Twitter at the Jim Cornette. You can follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts. Classic wrestling talk and wrestling humor. The 605 Superpodcast. Of course, do I even plug your things now, or should I tell people not to send you money?
Oh, goddamn. I'm still shocked and gobsmacked that Travis Bickle is running an escort service. Escorted by Travis Bickle's artwork. What?
Your videos are escorted by his artwork.
Well, for an extra $100 an hour, but this week, send me some money. Get it all in this week, because next week I'm going to take a day off. I'm just warning you now. So JimCornette.com.
Well, there it is. Until next week, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!